Over to you, Mr. Patrick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Swale. Good afternoon from East Africa. Good morning from the rest part of the world. My name is Patrick Mwema Mumo, the Regional Coordinator for FIDAL's Integrated Services Limited. And I wish to take this opportunity to welcome all of you to our third edition for East Africa Summit. And today we're going to be looking on a very contemporary topic that indeed is affecting the entire East Africa. We'll be looking on homosexuality, on tax regime, and security challenges within the East Africa community. As our guests will be dissecting these particular critical issues, giving us, the African solutions that we need, because it is a challenge that is within us, it's a challenge that is affecting our East African region. And of course, by extension, it is also, the other countries within our continent of Africa, they're also facing the same challenge. So today, at the end of this session, we hope that we're gonna have the solution, that will not only help the East Africa, but also, our continent at large. So to our viewers, listeners, I hope that you'll be with us until the end of our session. So today I'm joined by two guests, guests whom they are well experienced, guests whom I know without any iota of doubt that they'll be able, to give us solutions, that to the problems, the challenges that we are facing in our region. So starting with, and of course, it's a lady and a gentleman. And as they always say, Africans, we always say ladies first. So on that basis, I wish to introduce, our first guests for the day. And our first guest for the day goes by the name Bira Janet. Bira Janet is a trained advocate of the High Court of Uganda. Further to the above, she is a member of the Uganda Law Society and East Africa Law Society. She holds a postgraduate diploma in legal practice from the Law Development Center, Uganda. She holds a Bachelor of Laws and a Master of Laws pending completion of research from Kampala International University in Uganda. She holds a postgraduate certificate in Financial Literacy Training of Trainers Council course from Bank of Uganda. She further holds a postgraduate certificate in New Models of Business and Society from the University of Virginia, that's Darden School of Business in USA. She further holds a postgraduate certificate in Moral Foundations of Politics from Yale University, USA. She's currently the head legal
Mr. Patrick, I can't hear you. Is it only a challenge on my end? I can't hear Mr. Patrick.
At Muchungi and co-advocates. She is, again, CEO, founder of Janet Kahene Foundation Uganda. And she's formerly worked as the general manager of Nelines Integrated Services Limited, which they have several branches. That is the holding company being in Uganda and having other several subsidiaries in Tanzania, Rwanda, and Democratic Republic of Congo. Welcome, Madam Janet Bira.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick.
You're much welcome. Our second guest for the day goes by the name John Wesonga. And of course, before I forget, Bira is from Uganda, of course. And our second guest is from Kenya. Just in a minute. Just in a minute so that I'm able to fix something over here. Just in a minute. Yes, sorry for that. Our second guest is by the name John Masirivai Wesonga. John is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. He is a certified mediator and a member of Law Society of Kenya and Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, Kenyan branch. He holds a postgraduate diploma in law from the Kenya School of Law. He holds a Bachelor of Laws from Riara University, Nairobi, Kenya. He's a former legal assistant at Owino and Company Advocates and Masinde Ndivo and Associates Advocates. He's also a former researcher at United Democratic Alliance Party Dispute Resolution Committee. He is a legal researcher and drafter at the Presidential Task Force for the Improvement of Terms and Conditions of Members of National Police Service, Kenya Prison Service, and National Youth Service. And he is currently pursuing Masters of Law, Corporate Governance at Robert Kennedy College, University of Cabriya, Zurich, Switzerland. Welcome, Mr. John Masirivai Wesonga.
Thank you so much, sir, for that incredible introduction. And I'm much humbled. And let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. John. So without wasting much time, I wish us to just proceed, to the contemporary issues or the challenges that we are facing, in our region. And I wish us to start, on this particular issue of tax, which it indeed becoming, a very critical issue in our region. And, nobody wants to pay tax. And again, we must also appreciate the fact that we must pay tax, for government, to give us development. Because whenever we have, a regime coming on board, they normally have, the development agenda. And this development agenda can only be driven, by we paying taxes so that they can do development. But then again, we also appreciate the fact that a country does not develop by virtue of overtaxing the taxpayers. So we need to find a bottom line. And Councillor John will enable us, be able to dissect under what parameters then should our tax regime be operating from. So just to kick off, Mr. John, briefly just share with us, what you understand by tax and why would any government introduce taxation?
Oh yes, thank you, sir, thank you. From time immemorial, people have been coming together, organizing themselves, and looking for a way to move forward. From our reading, basically, because most of us here, or some of us here, have had an opportunity of reading some literature. So we find that way before we used to like depend on natural resources. We are just not organized. But now, due to development and due to human social interaction, people have been coming together, organizing themselves, choosing their leaders, choosing their representatives until where we are right now. So without much ado, so for you, like there is this a social contract between the general public and the government of the day. So we choose our leaders, and these leaders are supposed to come on board and help us drive our agenda. So because there's no way all of us we can say that we can build our own roads, we can build our own hospitals, we can do this on our own. We kind of like come together, and in this there are some laws that are supposed to be put in place to govern the same. And this now brings me to that subject of now taxation. You know, taxation is a very sensitive subject, both legally, socially, and economically. So if it's not handled with care, there's no way you can say this is like the bottom line. And that's why in most countries, we always have like these tax acts coming up almost every year to like give the government that authority to be able to tax its, let's say, its citizens. So let's take for example, in our country, Kenya, whereby we've just had the new regime come on board last year, around September. They had their own manifesto, the development agenda. When they came on board, they had these promises that they were like to give to the common man. So for them to be able to achieve these promises and this development agenda, they would want to have money. Money will have to come on board to be able to finance this development agenda. So where do we expect them to get this money? Of course, it is from the taxpayers. And who are these taxpayers? It is me and you, for example. But now, here comes the question. To what extent is this regime supposed like to tax us? To what extent? So that is a very sensitive subject. And if we are not careful, no one, as you've earlier said, no one is really willing to just pay tax, because tax is something that is the money that you pay. But as far as you're concerned as an individual, you are not going to get the value of your money, because no one will come and say, now this is your tax building this road, or this is your tax now doing this and that. So basically, no one is willing from outright just to pay tax. And that's why we need a legal framework to be able to govern how taxes are paid. And now we need a very sensitive law that will be able to govern this. And looking at us, we get to find that given that this is a very sensitive subject, and looking at Kenya, most people after this new regime came on board, and they have like their maiden tax law, which was very controversial depending on where one is standing. So there's this pro and cons moving back and forth. At long last, it landed in court. The High Court gave conservatory orders to stop the current regime, Kenya Kwanza regime, from implementing the tax act. The same was appealed to the Court of Appeal, which just last week, the Court of Appeal like lifted the conservatory orders, now giving the current regime to sort of move forward with their plan. Looking at the Kenya Revenue Authority, there is a notice that it gave, now backdating how this tax is supposed to be done, going back to July 1st. So most people have jitteries, most people are not okay with that, including our society, Law Society of Kenya. It has gone back to the High Court to challenge the legality of some of the critical provisions of that tax act. And
So
one
John,
of the main, yes, sir.
a minute, John, just a minute.
Yes, sir.
You have informed us that most of the people were actually complaining on this particular Finance Act.
Yes, sir.
Because the Kenya Revenue Authority decided to backdate to FIS, and of course
Exactly.
the law of Kenya have decided to proceed back to High Court.
Exactly.
So why do you think Kenyans are complaining about this particular issue?
Yes, as I had earlier said, no one is really willing to pay taxes from outrightly. And that's why when you are paid your salary, there is always this, for example, pay as you earn. No one will tell you, now I'm giving you this money, now give me this as a tax. No. Normally, in most cases, it is deducted upfront. And that's why people are not okay with that. Why? Because they feel like they're being overtaxed. Given that the current economic situation, there is no money generally. Money is not moving. And why money is not moving is because of the economic situation right now. And this has been like the main, let's say main actor of this current economic situation was the COVID-19 pandemic. When it came, people were confined, people didn't go out to work, and that was like the kickstart of these problems. Now it came about the Russia-Ukraine war, and as you are aware, Russia and Ukraine are the main, like we import most of the grains and foodstuff from Russia and Ukraine and fertilizers, for example. So that, in one way or the other, may have contributed to this harsh economic conditions. So now comes the current regime that now wants to overpromise. And if you promise, you have to fulfill. And where do they want to get the money? Of course, it's from the taxpayers. So they'll want to look for ways to get money to fund their promises. How do they get the money? From the taxpayers. Now, most people feel like they're being overburdened by this tax, given that even the salaries that they're getting right now is not enough to fund their daily activities.
So, John,
yes, sir.
Just on that part of the life that is the salary, the standard of living for civil servants. Can you just give us, paint us a picture, of just an average Kenyan civil servant, in terms of their salary, in terms of their standard of living, vis-a-vis the additional taxes that have been levied? Because I appreciate the fact that before, of course, people have been paying taxes. We have never seen people, having issues, when it comes to issue of paying tax. But this time around, we are seeing after the enactment of the Finance Act, we are seeing people rioting right center, and they are saying this tax is overburdening them. So can you just paint us, an average, civil salary, and then now try to justify it with the increased tax, and see whether there's any justification why they're crying over this tax issue, don't you?
Okay, if you may allow me, before I delve into your question, maybe just a small clarification. Every year, especially in Kenya, every year there is a new tax act that has been enacted. People always complain. It's not like we are seeing these complaints for the first time. People always complain, but we've seen this is because this has gone out of the box, for lack of a better word, because of now the harsh economic conditions. So people feel like instead of now adding these additional taxes, the government should reduce these taxes because of these harsh economic conditions. Every basic commodity has skyrocketed in terms of prices. The basic kilo of unga that used to be 30 shillings, Kenya shillings, it's now 150 Kenya shillings. You get the basic commodity like sugar, it has skyrocketed like 300% overboard. So it's not like people don't complain when there's a new enactment of a new tax act. No, people always complain, but this has been felt, one, because of the political environment in Kenya. We've just come from fresh elections, a new regime has come in. So this political rivalry has added that salt to the wound and also the harsh economic conditions. So it's not that they don't complain, they always complain, but right now the complaints are overboard. So now delving to a question about now painting the average civil servant. Let me see, like looking at the current or the proposed salary from the Public Service Commission, the least civil servant is supposed to be paid at least 25,000, used to be 22,000. So that's like the basic salary, 25,000. Yes. So looking at this 25,000 being the basic, so meaning this money is supposed to be deducted. So averagely pay as you earn, maybe this person will pay, let's say approximately 1,000. So you remain like around 24,000. Looking at the current tax act that has just been, the Court of Appeal has lifted the conservative orders, meaning the government has been given the legal go-ahead of now taxing Kenyans. So this person will go home with not more than 17,000, approximately. So looking at this person, maybe he's not living in a very superb environment. So maybe let's look at an average environment in Nairobi, Kenya. Let's say this person lives in Pipeline. So the cheapest house there is, let's say, at least 7,000 for one bedroom, and that's, let's say, the cheapest. So this person, after paying 7,000, you'll find that he'll remain with 10,000 approximately. So this person will need to eat every day. So approximately foodstuffs and everything, let's say it's 5,000. That's the least. Of course, no one can survive on 5,000 in Kenya right now per month, but let's assume anyone out there can do that. And this person, for you to survive on 5,000, you'll have to eat like 1 meal per day, assuming this person does not have a wife or any children. So averagely, this person is remaining in 5,000. So this person will have to come to work. Sorry. This person will have to come to work every day, and approximately he will have to use, like, let's say at least 3,000 on fare for transport. This person remaining with 2,000. Looking at the house utilities and everything, averagely the average Kenyan will have to pay at least 10,000. So this person per month already has a negative of 7,000. He's paid all his utilities, and it's remaining with negative 7,000 per month. So basically, what am I saying? What I'm saying, looking at the Public Service Commission latest salary review together with Salary Remuneration Commission of Kenya, they have proposed this. Of course, they are purporting to increase this, but looking at the tax that you are paying to the government vis-a-vis the salary, and you juxtapose the same with the current living condition, it is not viable. It's not fair at all.
Now, John, for purposes of our viewers, outside East Africa, basically we are saying, it was your position that, in terms of dollar, the least paid is roughly close to almost like $141, and is a position that after all the deductions have been made, somebody at the end of the month will remain with a negative almost close to $70 negative. And from information, you can.
I momentarily lost you. I don't know whether I'm the only one who can't hear Patrick. I lost you. Hello, Patrick. I lost you. I can't hear you. Then you're muted.
They lost a lot because of the income during the demonstration period. And don't you think, since the rationale behind demonstration because of the Finance Act, don't you think the government should probably, have come up with a better way to do this?
Mr. Patrick, I momentarily lost you for the better part of the last conversation. I didn't quite get the question. Might you be good enough to repeat the question, please? Hello, Patrick. Can you hear me?
Sorry for that, John. I'd say the rationale why there were demonstration was because of the Finance Act. And you have just demonstrated to us that after the increment of the tax, the least paid Kenyan will go home with a negative. Then,
that's true. At the end of the day, yeah.
Now, during the demonstration period, from the research, Kenyans used to lose close to 21.8 million, USD daily, because it affected, especially from the capital city. Now, don't you think that probably the government should have come up with a better way, to ensure this loss is not being made?
Yes, the upshot of that, responding to that, from my perspective, the short answer will be yes. But why yes? And if we will just like to lay the background, the political, I can't call them concluded, but the demonstration that we witnessed in Kenya, especially in major cities like Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nyeri, and part of, let's say, Kisii, you might want to say that most people came out to demonstrate because of the current economic situation and the tax that the current regime has imposed. But one would argue that no, especially me, I would say no. That was not the main reason why these people are demonstrating. Why? Look at the timing of the demonstrations. Look at the reasons why these people are coming out to demonstrate. Look at how they were handling themselves out there. Does it really communicate that these people are really hungry or they really want to communicate something to the government? If you really, you are honest yourself, you want to put across the message. They are laid down constitutional provisions of how you can approach a government institution. You can basically do a petition to parliament. You can approach the devolved system of government and do your petition. And there are also laid down procedures of how you are supposed to demonstrate or picket as per the provisions of Article 37 of the Constitution of Kenya. So I would say that these demonstrations were not about the Tax Act, and they were not about the economic situations or the current living conditions of an average Kenyan. They were more of a political instigation. So we have experienced this since introduction of multipartyism in 1992 in Kenya. Every time we have an election, whenever someone loses, they come out and say something is not right. Something is not right. So this was just an auxiliary of the reasons why the demonstrations were being witnessed in Kenya. So not delving into political angle too much. So just to answer your question, yes, the government needs to come up with more conducive ways of raising money without infringing on the common citizen on how feeding them, to get the little they have. some of our people, they are sleeping hungry right now. And they always go to work. Reason being, things are very tough right now. They can't afford. So about the demonstrations, not think about demonstrations. Demonstrations were basically not about the Finance Act, not about the economic living conditions of everyone. The demonstrations are purely political. So moving forward, the government needs like just to listen to what people are saying. As much as the government feels like they were overwhelmingly voted by the quote unquote the hustlers, but these hustlers also have a say. Looking at our history, our political history in 2002, most people voted for the Kibaki regime, the NAC regime. But 2 years down the line, there was this vote that came for the new constitution. The Kibaki regime lost. Why? Because he was not listening to what people were saying. So people are communicating right now. As much as I voted for you, right now it's not a point whereby you can come and introduce new taxes to already overtaxed citizens that there's no money basically. So how can the government now come to the rescue of Kenyans? We can revert to going back to what the last regime did during the COVID-19. Come up with some austerity measures, come up with some measures that will make sure, as much as you want to finance your development programs, but what is the priority? I'm sleeping hungry, and you are telling me I should give you money to build me a road. So what's the priority here? Should you look for a way of making sure that I sleep with something in my stomach, or should I give you what I already, the little I have, for you to be able to build me a road or a market or something? So the government just look at its priority, make sure that whatever it's doing to the people is on the priority basis. So right now, people are hungry. Feed people first. Do the austerity measures. If it helps, we can do some small of borrowing here and there. I don't think if a debt can really, I've never seen a debt really making someone not to live. But as much as we borrow with some consciousness, we borrow what we can be able to pay over time when we are now good economically. I think right now is not a time for introduction, for example, of the housing levy. I don't want a decent house when I'm sleeping hungry, honestly. So that will be my take on that.
That's on the same issue of demonstration.
Yes.
Many media houses and even international media houses accused, police of using excessive force. That they commit of they use excessive force, and many people, of course, as you know, got injured, others died. What would be your take on, on how police, conducted themselves, containing the demonstrations? What would be your view, or what would be your point on that?
These police officers, from the word group, they are also human beings. In one or the other, they are our brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, grandparents, or friends. So, and given that myself, I'm an officer of government, so I will be biased to some extent that as much as I try to be objective, but here I feel like there is a laid down procedure on how you're supposed to demonstrate, on how you're supposed to picket, as outlined at Article 37.
Yes.
So basically, you are supposed, first of all, to give the intention or the notice to the local OCS, a 7-day notice of your intention to picket or to petition or to do whatever you want to do. And the OCS is supposed to give, of course, that notice is not like you are asking for permission, but you are notifying the OCS first to give you security, you and your people, and also just to make sure that the route that you are using is secured for your exercising of your right. So, and if you look at how the demonstrations have been occurring, especially from just the concluded. Let's look at 2017, how things were before the handshake between the two brothers, Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga and the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta. Things were even worse than what we've been witnessing. So coming home, like just what we've been witnessing, that has not been demonstration. Like it does not meet the legal threshold of demonstration. That basically is hooliganism and taking advantage of constitutional rights just to air out political vendetta. Basically, I would call that demonstration. And the police officers are there to protect, one, protect lives, two, protect property. And there's no way you can protect someone's life or someone's property without first of all protecting yourself. And that's why when they come out, they have that gear to protect themselves first before they can protect someone else. So these people, they come, they do what? They congregate in one place. And once you congregate in one place without the permission of the local OCS, that is called an illegal assembly. And what will the police do? They'll have to disperse you because whatever you are doing is not legally right. As much as you will say like you are exercising your right, your constitutional right, but as much as you exercise your constitutional right, you should not like also infringe someone else's right, because everyone knows where your right stops is where someone else's right starts. So looking at the provisions of Article 24 of our Constitution, there's the threshold of how this limitations of rights. And there are only like 3 rights that can't be limited. Right to liberty, right against servitude, and right to there are only 3. So basically what am I saying? As much as you want to demonstrate, it does not mean like that right is not limited. It can be limited. And how you are supposed to exercise those rights, it's provided for. So basically, how the police handled themselves in the just concluded or just the demonstrations that we've been seeing, I would say most police officers acted within their right. But some, we can say, of course, there are rogue elements that went over and beyond, because I've seen on the news, especially in Kisumu, people are being fished out of their houses, being beaten to death. And we cannot say that is like, that's not the picture of a police officer. But generally, from the word go, the demonstrations were illegal, and the police officers had to come in to like quench the situation. So how the police officers handle themselves, like 90%, it was okay. But 10% of that retaliation was not very much okay. And looking at the media, especially local media in Kenya, it's been against this regime even from the word campaigning. So they will not show you the exact situation on the ground, but they will want to paint a picture that a police officer is using excessive force. But they won't show you why this police officer is retaliating. They'll just show you a police officer shooting maybe a tear gas or something. Then they want like to create a mountain over that anthill. But they won't go back to the behind the scene. What really happened? Police officers, they are our servants. They're supposed to serve us. But they can't serve us if they have come to do their work and then someone from nowhere throw a stone at them. How will you want to protect themselves? So basically, I wouldn't say their conduct was 100% okay. Some of them went overboard, like the guy the purported police officer who arrested someone while he was in civilian. He purported to be a journalist. That's not how police officers are supposed to conduct themselves. That was wrong, totally wrong. So if something bad happened, let's call it out, it is wrong. But if in the line of duty, police officers performing their duty, they're there to protect us, to protect our lives, to protect our properties. There's no way you can come from your home, you assemble, you want to throw stones at my business, and then I just look at you. Of course, I want to protect myself. That is a natural instigation. And because I can't do that, I've given the police authority to protect me. And how will police officer protect me? You are coming with stones, you are coming with clubs, with good weapons. They will have to use tear gas and rubber bullets to some extent. But I see, I agree. Some police officers were using live bullets. Some people are being beaten by police officers to death, and that is totally wrong. Those elements should be flashed out and be brought to book. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So what would be your general advice to all the stakeholders in a summary?
So by stakeholders, we've really come from far. We've talked about the tax regime. We've talked about the police. Okay, you didn't say police brutality, but basically that's what we've been discussing. Police brutality in the demonstration that we've witnessed. And we've talked about the general life of a civil servant. So by the general stakeholders, which sector of the stakeholders are we talking about here, or just generally?
Just general, of course. We have the government. Again, also we have the judiciary. We also have, our parliament system. We also have the police, who are also independent. Because this issue, it's cut across all those relevant, stakeholders. So, what would be your general, recommendation or an advice, on how probably the entire situation would have been handled and how we should handle it moving forward?
So thank you, Patrick, for that. So looking at the tax, because basically maybe this is what brought about all these problems, the enactment of the Tax Act of 2023. So basically, here I will advise the government just to listen. Government is made up of people. It's not a monster. And these people, basically, most of them, they are our peers. Most of them, they know the situation on the ground is not conducive at all. So basically, what I would advise the current government of the day, just to listen. And when they lend out that listening ear, maybe, and just maybe, they will be able to come up with the policies, with the laws, with the regulations that will not only be conducive to them, for them to achieve their development agenda, but also their employer, who happens to be the common citizen out here, will be happy by the end of the day. Now, also, you can't have a government without the opposition. Given that Kenya is a democratic country, we do hold elections after every 5 years. And wherever there's a winner, there must always be a loser. So these, in Kenya, call them opposition. The opposition leaders also just need to understand to some extent that, yes, we lost. Even if this is not the outcome that we wanted, but we lost. And given that in every competition there must be a winner, obviously there has to be a loser. So they need to come out to just wake up from the slumber and tell their followers that we agree, this is not the outcome that we wanted, but this is what has come out. Let's agree, we move forward. And instead of organizing for demonstration, the opposition leaders should come out and give the government of the day time, first of all, to settle in office, second of all, to help them come up with policies, with the legislation, with measures that will not only benefit the government, but benefit the entire country. And this idea of whenever you lose, there has to be like a scapegoat. You have to say, I lost because of this, because of that. Should just stop. Come on. We are not the only country in the world that has elections. Major developed countries in the world, they have elections almost, like for example, in the US, almost after 4 years. But we've never seen someone who has been defeated coming out, organizing their supporters that we didn't lose, but our elections, our votes were stolen. Stolen by who? Come on. Yes, even if the elections were stolen. Where were you? Where were you? So that will be my advice to the opposition. Just for the sake of the common citizen, come on, let's come on board. Let's bring each one of us, let's put our heads together and let's come up with the policies. Now, we have parliament, for example, we have institutions, independent institutions that are supposed like to come up with policies, with laws that will cushion us from these harsh economic conditions. We have our parliament. Our parliament is an independent and an arm of government, independent on its own. So it has just to stamp its authority. It is the only direct representation of our people. So whenever they sit down to do their duties as enshrined in our laws and in our constitution, they should do it to the best of their ability and to the benefit of their electorate. Looking at judiciary, it's also an arm of government on its own, and looking at how the cases have been coming up, especially as far as these demonstrations are concerned and the enactment of this act. Obviously, I haven't seen something that is so peculiar that judiciary has done wrong, because looking at the court was approached, it gave its ratio decidency on why it like didn't want the government to go ahead in the High Court to go ahead to implement the provisions of the current tax act. But the same is within the legal provisions. The Cabinet Secretary of Treasury and National Planning appealed that decision to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal gave its reasoning on why it felt okay to lift the conservatory orders and give the government the go-ahead of now implementing the tax act. So basically, given the situation right now, the judiciary is, I can say, is the only institution that has stamped its authority, and it is not to give its 100% like compliments, but at least it's showing some independence, some discipline. It has that the concern of the common citizen, because whatever reasoning that comes from the judiciary since the post 2010, it's reasoned decisions, and we can give it, let's applaud it, let's say this is good where something good has been done. And now looking at now the common, we are also the stakeholders in this, because most of these things affect the common citizen. I would just say to the citizens, we need to be patient. Let's just be patient. Let's give this regime at least, let's say at least 2 years. They settle in office, they do the policies, they come up with their own policies. Because right now, the current government is working on the budget of the last regime. And there's no way they'll have to align their thinking, their policies to the previous regime's budget. So we will have like given them this year. Let's say next year, now we can bring them on the chopping board and say, you said this and this and this, you have had your budget. Now, what is your achievement? But right now, saying that, for example, they have failed, saying that they have not done this, saying they have not done that, we will be lying to ourselves, because, come on, will not be fair to them. They are human beings also, and they have their own policy that they need to achieve. So basically, I will say to the citizens, let's be patient, let's give each other time, and 2 years or 1 year down the line, we can come back and say, this is what you promised, this is what you've done, it's not what you've done, now we want this and this done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor John, for that quite elaborative on this critical matter on tax regime. And without wasting much time, I would like us now to tackle our second segment, and is on this particularly important issue of homosexuality. And this is an issue that has caused a lot of rows within the East Africa. And on this particular matter, I would wish to engage Councillor Janet so that she can be able to elaborate to us, what all this context is all about and how indeed we should be able to, approach this particular matter. So, Councillor Janet, when we say, or when you talk about homosexuality, what exactly are we talking about?
Thank you very much, Councillor Patrick. First of all, I would love to plea that I would switch off my video for stability of the internet because connectivity is not all that stable.
Quite in order.
Much obliged. Okay. Thank you very much once again for coming in on this pertinent issue. Personally, I would never love to discuss about homosexuality, but it being that I'm representing Uganda on the same, allow me proceed. Well, homosexuality is a sexual orientation. A homosexual person is romantically or sexually attracted to people of their own gender. Men who are romantically or sexually attracted to other men are called gay, whereas women who are romantically or sexually attracted to other women are called lesbians. People who are romantically or sexually attracted to men and women are called bisexual. Together, homosexual, bisexual, and transgender people make up the LGBT community, which stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. One may say that homosexuality is the term used for people that feel romantically or sexually attracted to their own sex, but other definitions also exist. Usually, the term is used to view all the people who are romantically or sexually attracted to their own sex. Nonetheless, the most visible form of homosexuality is the actual relationship. The word homosexual comes from the ancient Greek word homo, meaning same, and the Latin word for gender. People in the LGBT community usually say gay instead of homosexual. There are many different words to describe homosexual people. Some of these are used to insult homosexual people. However, the LGBT community sometimes uses these words to describe themselves because the word homosexual can sound too clinical. This is done to make the word less hurtful. Some words to describe homosexual men are gay and queer. Words to describe homosexual women are lesbian and dyke. Lesbian is used most often. Dyke is used less often and is sometimes used to describe lesbians who are more masculine or act more or less like men. However, queer and dyke are sometimes used against gay people as insult, so they can sometimes be offensive. Councillor Patrick, that's it. I have to define who a homo is.
Thank you very much, Council, for that elaborate definition of, enabling us to try to appreciate what we appreciate by, homosexuality. But then I would wish to know, is this homosexuality natural? Are we born gay? Are we born lesbian? Is it just natural? Or is something that we normally, when we grow up, we find ourselves engaging on such? Is it natural really?
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. The answer to this question depends on how you define natural. If natural means genetically or biologically determined, then homosexuality is not natural. Decades of scientific research have failed to define a gay gene or some biological cause for same-sex attraction. No evidence suggests that it's natural for some people to be born gay. Sometimes natural refers to design. Something is natural if it is functioning the way it was designed to function. But homosexual behavior isn't natural in this sense either. It goes against the natural function of the body. Male and female bodies can fit together naturally because their organs work together harmoniously, produce new humans, a clear identification that natural design favors heterosexual rather than homosexual unions. If I may invite you to Romans chapter 1, verses 26 to 27, follows this same reasoning. Paul says that men abandoned the natural sexual function of women and engaged in unnatural sex with men. His words make it clear that homosexual behavior is unnatural because it is a rejection of God's design for sex. Homosexual desire then would also be unnatural for the same reason. It deprives people to abandon the natural design and function of human sexuality. Some argue that homosexuality is natural in the sense that God created people that way. No, but there is no reason to believe this. On a scientific view, they don't even prove the same sexual orientation, but they just make theories in the same by making it so more complex. Interplay of genetic, hormonal, and environmental influences. I do not view it as choice, although no single theory on the cause of sexual orientation has yet gained widespread support. Scientists favor biological-based theories. This is not, but it has more especially been social. Some people who believe to the same. So I'll conclude suggesting and submitting that homosexuality is not natural.
Thank you very much, Councillor Janet. Some traditionalists sought to the view that this violates African culture and religion. Would you be of the same opinion?
Well, most African countries are constitutional democracies that afford excessive rights and freedoms to their citizens and safeguard their dignity. Uganda's current constitution, for example, is widely hailed as an inspiring model of a state's observance for these freedoms. Yet the anti-LGBTQ supporters claim to be motivated by religious and cultural values and ideas. From religion perspectives, homosexuality is problematic because it is sinful, and sinful because it offends against God's will. Several theologians deny this, but whether or not religious condemn same-sex relationships, my position is that in many African societies, the problem has to do less with sinfulness than with an existential and moral commitment. To put it more plain, I believe that many people oppose homosexuality because they feel they have a culturally sanctioned moral commitment to have children, and that commitment stems from the cultural ultimate goal of promoting community welfare. Now, in my view, the right of homosexuals can be better protected by an African moral theory than the standard constitutional safeguards. Well, if you look at things to do with religion, we don't have to go to as the biggest sin ever. The Bible talks about blasphemy being unforgivable sin. If I may invite you to what the Bible talks about blasphemy, more specifically in the book of Mark chapter 3, verses 28 to 29, it clearly states that blasphemy it's unforgivable sin. So I don't want people to look at it in a perspective that when someone is a homosexual, actually he or she has committed blasphemy. That's not what the Bible talks about. Yes, it is sinful, but it is not the biggest sin. It's not that sin that is unforgivable as per the Bible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comparisons. Borrowing a leaf from the animal kingdom, we don't normally hear such incidences. So does this mean animals are better than men? Council?
All right. In the efforts of LGBTs to present homosexuality as normal, the homosexual movement turned to science in an attempt to prove three major premises, one of which is that homosexuality is genetic or innate. Another one, or the second one, was that homosexuality is irreversible. The third one was that cis animals engage in same-sex sexual behavior, homosexuality is natural. Keenly aware of its inability to prove the first two premises, the homosexual movement pins the hopes on the third animal homosexuality. The reasoning behind the animal homosexuality theory can be summed up as follows. Homosexual behavior is observable in animals. Animal behavior is determined by their instincts. Nature requires animals to follow their instincts. Therefore, homosexuality is in accordance with animal nature. Since man is also animal, homosexuality must also be in accordance with human nature. This line of reasoning is unsustainable. If seemingly homosexual acts among animals are in accordance with animal nature, then parental killing of offspring and interspecies devouring are also in accordance with animal nature. Bringing man into the equation complicates things further. Are we to conclude that filicide and cannibalism are according to human nature? Of course, no. In my opposition to this line of reasoning, the following can be advanced to. There is no homosexual instinct in animals. It's poor science to read human motivations and sentiments into animal behavior. And irrational animal behavior is not a yardstick to determine what is morally acceptable behavior for rational man. To stimuli and clashing instincts, however, one must add another factor in expressing its affective state. An animal is radically inferior to man. I therefore state that you cannot compare man to an animal because animals do not have that fear, pleasure, pain, desire. Animals are so limited. So there is no way you can talk about an animal. When you look at a man, he has that instinct of talking, writing, casing, gesturing, and untold ways, which animals do not have. So by all standards, there is no way you would say that you can compare a man to an animal because a man is a master of all creatures as by God. I invite you to the book of Genesis.
Thank you very much for the invite. In your submission, I've heard you making references to, several provisions, of Constitution, making reference to the Ghanaian Constitution. Appreciating these relevant laws, both national and regional and also international, you find, persons have this right of freedom, to do what they wish to do. So don't you think, again, homosexualities, also should also be given an opportunity to enjoy their freedom, to be whom they are?
Well, thank you very much, Castle Patrick. The right to sex identity incorporates the right to express one's sexuality and to be free from discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation. Specifically, it relates to the human rights of people of diverse sexual orientations, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender LGBT. People and the protection of those rights, although it is equally applicable to heterosexuality, no right to sexuality exists explicitly in international human rights law. Rather, it is found in a number of international human rights instruments, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic and Social Cultural Rights. Of course, I shall not forget also our Constitution of Uganda, the 1995 Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, as amended. Sexual orientation is defined in the preamble of the Yogyakarta Principles as each person's capacity for profound emotional affection and sexual attraction to intimate and sexual relations with individuals of different gender or the same gender or more than one gender. Freedom from discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation is found in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I shall be keeping on referring to as UDHR, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which I shall keep on referring to as ICCPR. The UDHR provides for non-discrimination in Article 2, which states that everyone is entitled to the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, religion, language, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Furthermore, no discrimination shall be made on the basis of the political, jurisdiction or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty. In the ICCPR, also Article 2 states the same. Also, when you look at Article 21 of the 1995 Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, states the same. Now, in 2005, 29 experts undertook the drafting of the Yogyakarta Principles on the application of international human rights law in relation to sexual orientation and gender. People of diverse sexual orientation and transgender people, the application of international human rights law to those experiences and the nature of obligation on sex in respect of those experiences. The principles can be broadly categorized into the following. When you look at principle 1 to 3, set out, I'm referring to the Yogyakarta Principles. Principle 1 to 3 set out the universality of human rights and their application to all persons. Then principle 4 to 11 address fundamental rights to life, freedom from violence and torture. Then principle 12 to 18 set out non-discrimination in relation of economic, social, and cultural rights, including employment, accommodation, social security, education, and health. Then principle 19 to 21 emphasizes the importance of freedom of expression, identity, sexuality without state interference, including peaceful assembly. Principle 22 and 23 set out the right to seek asylum from persecution or based on sexual orientation. Principle 24 to 26 set out the right to participate in family and cultural life and public affairs. Then principle 27 sets out the right to promote and defend human rights without discrimination based on sexual orientation. Then lastly, principle 28 and 29 emphasize the importance of holding those who violate human rights accountable and ensuring redress for those who face the rights violation. The Yogyakarta Principles is an instrument of soft law and therefore not binding, but it does provide an important stand for that in their obligation to protect the rights of individuals of diverse or sexual orientation.
Now, having submitted as such, we all bear the fact that homosexuality is, or people who subscribe to that ideology, basically by nature, they are not able to, give children. At least for the few years that I've lived on this planet, I haven't seen, any member of such the subscription, having been able to give birth. But from my research, I found out that these guys are actually adopting children. Do you think it's a good practice to do such, Council?
Well, in my opinion, I believe that the real question is whether a child who needs to be adopted is best served by a homosexual couple Oh, oh my goodness. All things being equal. The question focuses on the needs of the child, not the ones of homosexuals who are politically motivated to normalize same-sex marriage and parenting. I would love to quote Section 3 of the Children Act of Uganda as amended, which basically talks about the best interest of the child. So in the circumstances, I don't really think this is the best interest of the child. However, the answer is straightforward. Decades of published research in psychology, social science, and medicine demonstrate that children do best when raised by a mother and a father, especially the biological parents in a long-term marriage. That's because a mother and a father each provide a unique and important contribution to their role as parents. Children who are raised, for example, in fatherless families suffer on average in every measure of well-being. They have a high level of physical and mental illness, educational difficulties, poverty, substance abuse, criminal behavior, loneliness, and physical. Homosexual adoption, by design, will deny a child either a mother or father every time. By legalizing same-sex parenting, society declares by law that mother and fathers are interchangeable. That means a mother offers no unique contribution to a child. A man could provide all the benefits of a woman, besides being constitutive. This deprives a son or a daughter the distinctive benefit of being raised by both sexes. A compassionate and moral society comes to the aid of motherless or fatherless children. We don't intentionally design families to deny children a mother or father, but that's the result of same-sex parenting. Can you imagine, Pastor Patrick, two men guiding a young girl through her first ministerial cycle? Oh my goodness. Or hoping, oh, Jesus, the awkwardness of speaking out her first breath and then trying to tell them this is a couple of a man and a woman. Isn't this weird? I don't think this really is something so valuable in my own opinion. The best interest of the child will be buried. I condemn you.
Thank you very much for your submission, Councillor Bira. Then again, some people are connoting that, it's important or it is critical for us, to have this conversation, while our children are of tender age, so that by the time they are growing up, they are not exposed to these things without their knowledge. And so people are preempting that it should be important for us to have discussion, with our children, so that by the time as they continue growing up, they are aware of the dangers, that may come to them, especially with this kind of, category of persons. So in your considered opinion, do you think it will be important for us to have a discussion of such a magnitude with our children as they grow up?
Well, over the past years, countries have made enormous strides on marriage equality. However, with emerging trends, the question is, are we ready to bring LGBT topics into our curriculum, homes, and classrooms? There are approximately quite a number of same-sex couple households, and some of them have children in the household. Further, there are many children and adults who have an LGBT parent. In addition to the children of same-sex couples attending our schools, there are students who themselves identify as lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, and queer questions. Many of these students suffer teasing, bullying, harassment, violence, and internalized oppression that can lead to academic consequences, risky behavior, and even suicide. There are gay and lesbian educators in our schools, but many don't feel safe to be out to their students and the school community. LGBT teachers do not have the same privilege that heterosexual teachers have to talk about their parents, spouses, and other core aspects of their lives. and the school climate can be downright hostile towards them. There have been recent cases of teachers getting fired because of their sexual orientation. For children and teenagers, just admire and care about someone who is LGBT. Given that our schools are populated with children of same-sex family households, LGBT students, and gay and lesbian teachers, it's high time we brought this topic into our nation's school and classrooms in comprehensive way. It is an opportunity to expand young people's concept of family, discuss marriage equality, infuse the curriculum with LGBT people and their history and accomplishment, and address bias-based bullying for children who are identified as LGBT or are perceived as such. For young children, family is central to the curriculum. Therefore, discussing same-sex household families should be integral to the conversation. This normalizes instead of marginalizes children in same-sex households. Children in those families need to feel comfortable talking about their own families, and when those families are not represented in classrooms, somehow they feel neglected. So to the best or the well-being of children, I think we have to discuss about it so that they are aware and it's not a shock of their lives when they get out there.
Thank you very much, for such explanation. Again, there's a time you're making reference to various legal instruments, and you'll find that in most of constitution of most of our countries, you'll find them prohibiting discrimination, on the basis of gender or sex, and that makes me wonder, don't you think, again, are we not supposed, to accord similar treatment, to homosexualities, to homosexuals? What would be your opinion on that?
Well, discrimination against LGBT people undermines the rights principles outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and national laws. Yet discrimination and violence against people in the LGBT community are all too common. Homophobic, biophobic, and transphobic attitudes remain deeply embedded in many cultures around the world. All states are obliged under international human rights law to promote and protect the human rights of all persons without discrimination. Yet in many countries, laws against cross-dressing are used to punish transgender people on the basis of their gender identity and expression. Additionally, in 7 countries, discriminatory laws criminalizes private, consensual same-sex relationships. As a result, LGBT individuals are exposed to the risk of arrest, blackmail, extortion, stigma, discrimination, violence in at least 5 countries with a death penalty. Protecting LGBT people from violence and discrimination does not require a new set of human rights laws and standards. States are legally required to safeguard the human rights of LGBT people. This is well established in the International Human Rights Law. It is based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other international human rights treaties. The core legal obligation of states with respect to protecting the human rights of LGBT people include obligation to protect individuals from homophobic and transphobic violence, prevent torture and cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, repeal laws criminalizing same-sex relations and transgender people, especially sentencing them to death penalty, prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, safeguard freedoms of expression, association, and peaceful assembly for LGBT people, because in so doing, condemnation will not change anyone, but we can only change them by love. As it is written in the book of Galatians, Galatians chapter 5, verses 15, it clearly states that it is very crucial, by the way. It provides that the rest of the truth on this subject my brothers and sisters who are called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh, rather serve one another humbly in love. So I believe that we need to serve the LGBT with love and rather than condemnation.
Very good. Most people have, argued that this issue of homosexuality is actually a Western policy and not our African culture. It's not in any way related to our African culture. And the rationale why, they have decided, to bring it into African culture is to destruct or destroy our African culture and morals, so that probably even we don't, multiply. Of course, as I said, the LGBT community, they cannot multiply. So this is one of the ways of trying to reduce our population as Africans and also destroy, our culture and morals. What would be your take?
Yes, Castle Patrick, there are many reasons, but colonial laws, religious, morality, and the idea that homosexuality is imported by the Western are among the most influential scholars say of the 72 countries worldwide that criminalize homosexuality. 32 of them are in Africa, where punishment range from imprisonment for life, death penalty in countries such as Mauritania, Uganda, and Sudan. More than half of these are former British colonies, where colonial administrators introduced laws prohibiting unnatural acts. Around 93 sub-Saharan Africans are either Christian, 63 or 30, making the continent one of the most religious in the world. These beliefs are so influential. African elites, which include political, religions, and community leaders, often claim that homosexual practice are imported as Western evil. Longtime Zimbabwean leader Robert Mugabe called homosexuality an African and white disease. Uganda President, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, said that it is a Western import. In my conclusion, I don't believe that this is the position, that it is actually imported to us by whites, because I remember so very well, so much that when I was young, I was in a high school, I remember that we had those children who came from single schools and we had them coupling. You'd hear girls of the same sex coupling. So when you find that for you, you're becoming a friend to such a girl, not because you just take as you, or just a friend like a sister, then you'd see the couple becoming so bitter with you. No one had told it to them. I don't think that there was any white who was in that school telling these children to do that. So I don't believe that it is indeed imported to us by whites, but it is, in my own opinion, it is a spiritual welfare that needs prayers and needs to be broken and bound in the name of Jesus. They need deliverance.
Thank you, Councillor Bira, for your quite elaborative submission regarding on this particular matter. And in conclusion, what will be, your advice on the role the government and also our parents needs to play in protecting the sexual identity?
For children exploring their gender identity and sexuality, the support they get at home from their parents or guardians plays a huge role. While you may want to do what's best for your child, you may feel unprepared to adequately support your child or your children who are gender non-conforming or are exploring their sexuality. The parents can play the following roles. 1, believe your children and provide judgment-free space. when your children come to you, Castle Patrick, and you have realized that they are having that kind of sexuality that is not conforming to you, you really need not to be so judgmental. You should give them a judgment-free environment or space so that you can speak to them in a friendly manner. Create an open, respectful environment within the home as a parent. It's important to remember that each child is different from the other. So in so doing, as a parent, you just need to, if at all you have seen such kind of a behavior, or which I would call a weird behavior, you just need to speak to this child in a friendly manner, counsel them with love and not condemnation. Now, what the government has to do in the circumstance is that the core legal obligation of states or government with respect to protecting the human rights of the LGBT people include protect individuals from homophobic and transphobic violence, prevent torture and cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, repeal laws criminalizing same-sex relations and transgender people to death, prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, safeguard freedoms of expression, association, and peaceful assembly for the LGBT people. That makes it the end. And the last verse will be Galatians chapter 5, verses 15, that we should always treat them with love. Over to you, Pastor Patrick.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bira, for that, quite engageful, discussion on this topic that most people would be very much afraid, to engage on, because, it's a very serious matter that is affecting not only our region, but also our continent at large. Due to time factor, we have to proceed to the third segment, and the third segment is on security of our region. You'll find that in our region, which comprises of course, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Congo, South Sudan, and now, we'll be joined by Somalia, and also Ethiopia is also on their pipeline. We have really need, face a lot of security issues within our region. And I think today is quite important for us to, be able to enlighten ourselves, what's the problem with the security, sector within our region. And just to open up the floor, I would like to invite, Council John, probably to just give us, a simple background of the security status in our region. Council John, what is the security status in our region currently?
Thank you, Patrick, for that. So currently, as you have elaborated, we have in the current East African community, the current countries include Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, DRC, Rwanda, South Sudan is coming, and also Somalia is coming, and also, let's say, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti. So basically, when you look at our current security situation, it is not up to notch when you compare it to the rest of the world. So basically, we are facing some challenges, and these challenges in most cases come due to, let's say, some contemporary challenges that the region has been facing from our history. Yeah, just from, let's say, from our colonial era, come to post-colonial era, and Cold War border disputes, ideally ideological differences, then power fights, then interstate, intrastate conflicts. Basically, these things have really come up, and our security is in one way or the other being compromised with let's say all these challenges coming together. So when you look at the intrastate conflict, for example, look at Somalia in 1991. So it has faced some devastating national and regional security, and it has brought about some element of international terrorism. So look at Kenya, for example, seeing the return of multipartyism in 1992. We've witnessed ethnic violence, we've witnessed electoral after every election, we have some violences. We've also seen and witnessed the rise of gangs, internal gangs, for example, let's call them Mungiki. We've also witnessed SLDF, Support Land Defense Forces, sometime during the Kibaki regime. We've witnessed Mombasa, the famous Mombasa is not Kenya, that gang. We've witnessed banditry, especially in the Rift Valley. Some numerous militias have come up. When you look at, for example, Uganda, the rebels in the north have really brought about some security challenges. When you also look at Rwanda, the genocide of 1992 and its after effect, it has really brought about there's this trauma that comes up with that history, and most people really are traumatized because of that, and that has brought about security challenges. When you look at Burundi, its ethnic rivalries between political and ethnic rivalries between different tribes wanting to control this section, control that, control this. Look at South Sudan, for example, the ethnic and leadership rivalries. Basically, East Africa as a community, we are made up of different, diverse, both culturally and politically. So it becomes a challenge. It becomes a very great challenge when you want to address these issues from one perspective. First of all, you need to understand what is really bringing about this problem. So, for example, look at the failed state and ungoverned spaces in our region. So there are some spaces in our region where even government cannot even enter those regions. And this has brought about regional insecurity and conflict streaming right from those failed regions. So it's like there's fear benchmarking. So if I see this region, for example, wants to govern itself, also that and that and that, and I also want to imitate the same, and this brings also about the security challenge. Moving forward, looking at the general conflicts emanating from ethnicity, from also in South Sudan, we've seen secession in 2005, South Sudan becoming the youngest country, 2011 becoming an independent state. So with that, you'll find that some political elements, for example, in Kenya, there's been a widespread of talk of secession, and this has brought about security challenges with political influence. When also something to talk about when, as far as security is concerned, is about the resources. In most cases, you'll find that the conflicts will come about because of resources. So one, because of the scarcity and contestation of the shared resources, especially with let's talk of Kenya, the northern part and northeastern part of Kenya, whereby most resources are shared. You'll find that most natives there will have to fight over the cross borders and regional land use conflicts, and also regional and transboundary water conflicts, including pastoral and ethnic conflict, brings about security challenges in our region. Also, when you look at on the same subject still of resources, looking at the regional and mineral resources conflict and wars that come about because of the mining, because of the trade, because of that, the valued minerals, especially, for example, in the Great Lakes area, Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya coming up, claiming a certain, for example, certain island is theirs. For example, Kenya will say Migingo is ours, Uganda will say, hey, Migingo is ours. Why? Because maybe Migingo in one way or the other is a strategic place for trade for both these countries. So you'll find that brings about the conflict, and security issues will also crop up. So also looking at the terrorism situation, especially in Somalia. So terrorism comes about in threefold, if I'm not wrong. One is the domestic or local terrorism organized mainly by local groups because they want, for example, because of maybe political situation, or because they want just to air their views out, or they want to protect their resources. In one or the other, people organize themselves in small groups and would want to air their views in certain way. And because no one is listening to them, they will resort to violence for their message to come up. The second, whereby terrorism has manifested in our region, is domestic people organizing themselves, or local people organizing themselves, and they have a regional connection, whereby there is this, let's say, an influential person who wants this influential seat, and because maybe they don't have that political maneuver ways, they want to organize people in small groups, sponsor those people, then they cause havoc, and then they come in with pretext of trying to solve the situation, and then their value is added to the society, that were it not for this person, this would not have happened. And then by the end of the day, they achieve their, for example, their political or social status, but at what cost? By terrorizing other people, so that they can add value to their goals. And thirdly, where terrorism has really manifested itself in our region is international organization coming on board, having local support. So you'll find, for example, international organizations like Al-Shabaab, like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, they have local support. They come, they support a certain group of people, and then they start unleashing terror to the local people. So generally, when you look at this, you'll find that Uganda and Sudan have been the victims of the two scenarios that I've discussed. And Kenya and Somalia, we've witnessed all three scenarios, whereby we witnessed both local militias organizing themselves without support, then unleashing terror to the general public. And also we've witnessed the international organizations, international terror organizations, in terms of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Al-Shabaab, organizing themselves and having local support, whereby they just start unleashing terror without really cogent reason. Another scenario whereby security issue has come up in our region is piracy. Piracy has really brought up this security issue, especially in the maritime, our maritime borders, or at the shores of the oceans. So maritime security is a major concern, and especially the shores of Lake Victoria, Lake Turkana in Kenya, Lake Victoria in the three countries, that is Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya, and the Indian Ocean, at the borders, Indian Ocean there, whereby we have Tanzania, Kenya, and Somalia. So we've really witnessed this piracy issue that comes about with drug trafficking. We've also witnessed Lake Victoria having drug trafficking, armed attacks, and smuggling. And Lake Turkana, recently we've witnessed violent banditry activities around that region. So that has brought about security concern in our region. So another thing, another aspect of the security in our region is the organized crime or organized criminal gangs. So you'll find that in most of our countries, there are criminal groups organized and structured for purpose of committing serious crimes for profit, basically. So you unleash terror, and after you've unleashed that terror to innocent people, you get a conglomerate of, like for example, a town, you control that town, and then for what end? For profit, especially monetary value. So this encompasses trafficking in small arms and light weapons, drugs, human beings, cyber attacks, cyber crimes, and money laundering. So basically, it's a concern. It's a security concern that has really come up that need to be tackled. So another thing or another aspect that has like brought about the security issue in our region is how we respond to these issues. Or before I proceed, that is like generally, that is the general scenario of the national security and the regional security in our region. So you'll find that East Africa, as from the word go, you'll find that the main reason why we have the, for example, East African community was for trade. So it's, for example, it's an economic bloc. But there's no way we can have an ample environment to do trade if there is security concern in our region. So I would say that how we respond to these security issues in our specific countries also brings about the challenges of now security in the whole region. So we need like
yes, just on that one.
Yes.
Just on that one, allow me bring in and Councilor Janet, you will appreciate the fact that in our region, there's a lot of budget, in the end sphere of security that have been budgeted for, but you find ourselves, we are still, struggling, to, secure our boundaries. And I remember just last month, there were casualties in terms of insecurity in Uganda. So what would be your point, or what would be your opinion on why, notwithstanding the financial muscle that you have put on security, but you're still having security threats? What do you think might be the issue? Councilor Janet.
Okay. Councilor Patrick, notwithstanding the enormous money budget for security, East African countries are still battling with security challenges due to the following as classified: interstate border. Common to many conflicts is the unsatisfactory nature of interstate borders. Nearly all these borders were inherited from colonial times and were the product of negotiations and treaties. Between the colonial powers, sorry about that. Sorry, Castle Patrick, there came a local call, so it had to destabilize the network. And were the product of negotiations and treaties between the colonial powers decided in Europe with the aid of poor maps and with scant attention to African people. And when you look at that, you see that we have so many existing reasons, which will actually you end up spending money, but they're not really doing anything. The existing state structures do not satisfy variously the aspirations for cultural identity, autonomy, economic democracy, and self-determination of different nationalities coexisting with the contemporary states. Thus, they feel with parents of a state are harbored in neighboring countries and guerrillas armed and trained There are itself a cause of both internal and interstate conflicts. A clear example can be the backcross between Uganda and Kenya covered in the Jingo Island. So basically, when you look at the ethnicity, a major cause of East African conflict has been ethnicity, and it has continued to be so. The creation of nation states at the time of independence was accompanied urgent call for the nation building by the new African leaders who were well aware of the difficulty in transcending African ethnic and regional loyalties. The European concept of a union was exported to Stephen McCarthy's definition of a nation as a complex web of common culture, social, and economic interests among people, leading to assess that what they share in common is greater than their region, tribal, or other differences simply reflects features which many East African states did not have. There have been a number of separatist movements causing attempts at secession. Military coups have also often been caused by ethnic rivalry as well as personal rivalry, such as Idi Amin Dada's coup in Uganda in 1971, caused by inter-ethnic rivalry among leading army officers, as well as the ethnic resentment against the civil head of state. Idi Amin was able to recruit solidarity of people in that. So when you look at Rwanda, between the Hutu and Tutsi, so also another reason is political reasons. Power struggles, hostile groups, overpopulation, economic, religious disparities, oppression, and demands for democracy. Communal or ethnic violence related to economic, social, religion, culture, or ethnic issues are among the leading causes of insecurity in Africa. For instance, the LRA war in Uganda was partly because the people of northern Uganda had been marginalized. The 2007 post-election violence in Kenya was due to the fact that a section of the population was dissatisfied with the election results, as earlier on submitted by Castle John Wesonga. Then persecution, it connotes violations of human rights, mass movements of refugees, poverty or instability caused by the mismanagement or inaptitude of the government, including evident and perceived levels of corruption by the government beyond any acceptable limits of traditional toleration. This can cause mass uprisings as the masses or the section of the masses fights for their rights. Then poor economic performance. A more basic and long-term cause of conflict has been the catastrophic economic performance of many East African countries, coupled with a debt problem. Poor flows of private capital into some African countries and foreign aid programs often inefficient. In the midst of poverty, ruling classes or the elite group who happen to hold power at a particular time have enriched themselves and become the targets of envy or rivalry by other elite groups. Politics is a commercial venture in her own right. As Roger Tangiri puts it, conflict arises not so much out of the clashes of ideologies or programs, but for profit, often for just an elite few. For the masses take little part in this part of the conflict. Nearly all tribal or ethnic conflicts are rooted in competition between individuals for the scarce resources of wealth and state power.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bira, for that, elaborative, view in response to the issue of security within our region. And without any doubt, indeed, we are seeing this being, a serious issue, within our region, and we have looked, all you guys have elaborated on, why we are facing these particular challenges within East Africa. and notwithstanding of the power that we have to manage the issue of insecurity in our region. So my last question, to the both of you, and starting with Councillor John, then what do you think, in 1 or 2 minutes, just in a nutshell, what do you think we need to do in our region for us to be secure in terms of security? Just in 1 or 2 minutes. Councillor John.
Yes, Council. So,
just in a nutshell.
Yes.
Having looked at all the challenges, having looked at the causes and why we are, facing insecurity issues in our region, what do you think, in a summary, just in 1 or 2 minutes, what do you think that we need to do to secure our region?
Yes, thank you, Council, for that. Given the elaborative discussion that we've had, what we need to do first is we need to be honest with ourselves, especially our leaders. Our leaders need to come up with a clear regional hegemon to provide leadership with a securitizing process and making sure that we are honest with ourselves. We need to, for example, we need to be open to discussion. We need to realize that all of us are not the same. For example, me in Kenya, I can't be expected to be at par with someone who is, for example, in southern Tanzania or northern South Sudan. So first of all, we need to be honest with ourselves. Secondly, we need to have clear and concrete appreciation of shared understanding about the constituents or the common threats that we face as a region. So when we realize and when we are honest with ourselves, we have the clear and concrete appreciation of our shared understanding, then tackling this security situation in our region will be easier. Thirdly, our efforts, we should have efforts. And we should also be open to pass, for example, to come together and also tackle the security issues as one. For example, if we are saying there is terror attack, for example, in Somalia, we should not just stay put and say, let Somalia handle its internal security issue. We should be able to come out as a region and help Somalia to tackle the terror issue in Somalia. For example, when Kenya is facing, let's say, demonstrations, we should not just sit back and say that is an internal situation with Kenya. Let it handle its own internal affair. No, as the leaders, we should be able to come on board. We should be able to speak to each other. We should be able to come up with measures that will help other countries, for example, to avoid such situations. Also, we have mistrust and suspicion between our partners. And for us to be able to tackle this mistrust and suspicion between the countries that form East African region, we should be open and we should be able to progress and implement regional security strategies that will not only secure our region, but also secure each and every member state of our region. Lastly, Council, for us to be able to tackle security issues in our region, we should also benchmark with other countries and see what they have done that we've not done as far as the security situation is concerned. So first, there are some, for example, let's say NATO. What has NATO done that we as a region, we can copy? For example, SADC, what have they done that we as a region, we can copy? So if we can be able to benchmark, see what they have done so far, see the policies that they have put in place, be able to copy the good policies and leave the bad ones, be able to copy their good behaviors and leave the bad behaviors, and implement the same. It's not about a matter of copy and pasting, but we copy and we modify for it to suit our situation, and we move forward. So basically, we can also, one of the main thing that we can be able to do as a country is to have collaboration between our respective national security organs. They can be able to come together as the security agencies to use their constitutional mandate of, eventually, we know most security agencies, their constitutional mandate is to offer security to their respective national, respective countries. So if we allow them, for example, to come together and be able to do something we call, for example, tackling the policies and issues together, we can be able to tackle these security issues in our region without any problem. We should also be able to let the non-state actors and be able to adopt the informal way of solving conflicts. So we've seen our conflicts come about because of various issues. And these issues, before they become real issues, maybe if someone just woke up and were honest with themselves to tackle the issues before they crop up and grow and ripe to be issues, we would not have witnessed some of these security concerns that we are witnessing right now. So if we allow the inclusion of non-state actors, they come on board, we do mediation, we do arbitration, we do conciliation, whereby we try to tackle the issues before they ripe. By the end of the day, we will have a secure region, which will be conducive for economic development, for trade, and for prosperity of our respective nations and also the region. Thank you, Council.
Thank you very much. Council Bira, just in 1 or 2 minutes, what then would be your advice, in terms of combating insecurity in our region?
Okay. Thank you very much, Council Patrick. The best way to combat insecurity in our region, first of all, we need to appreciate the fact that we are African. What am I driving to? Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism should be adopted, should be appreciated, more especially with our leaders and we, the nationals of the region of Africa. Let it not only be at East Africa, but entirely as African. So when we love our race as Africans, I believe that surely insecurity can be combated. I can also submit this, I'm given 1 to 2 minutes. I can still say unity is a very big and important thing. Just like Castle John had earlier on submitted. When we have unity, let's understand that whatever is affecting Kenya is affecting Uganda, because this is an organization, intergovernmental organization. So we should not just sit back and say it is about Kenya. It's none of our concern. Can we pull a hand as East Africa? Can we pull a hand as Africa? So we should understand that that one has to be done. Then we should be patriotic. Let's love our countries. Let's love our region. We need to be patriotic, because when you're patriotic, you can always understand. Non-patriotism, it's what is calling for those wars, unnecessary wars, by the way. Because if you love your country, you understand the consequences that are attracted or attributed to wars. So if you really love your country, if you really love your region, then you have no reason to why you would wage war against that. You'd rather go for mediation. You'd rather demonstrate than waging war against your country. Then another thing is that sometimes I would believe that it is because of poverty. So people think the best way to do, they are just tired, they're looking for jobs, they're not finding them, they are too poor, so they think, well, if we can wage war and then we come into power, we shall make this. May God help us and bless the works of our hands, as it is written in the book of Deuteronomy 28. that thou shalt he bless the works of our hands. So I think if we can overcome that, for example, we have enough resources in Africa. Now in Uganda, we have gotten petroleum. So if we can pull resources together as East Africa, oh my goodness, we have no need to look for Russia. We have no need to look for any other country. Of course, I don't want to go too much, to delve much into that, but I stop there, Council Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Vera, for that oversight. Thank you, members. Thank you, our guests. It has been a lovely, wonderful, insight to these contemporary issues that are indeed affecting, our region. And that, of course, brings the end, of our today's, deliberation. But before we close, there are several of them questions that they have been submitted, but I would just wish to, because most of them, they are correlated. So I will just, just sample and be able to consolidate each of you. To Councillor John, there are many questions that are coming across, and they are basically on the issue of each of the tax regime. You spoke about being patient with the government, but then somebody is asking, then don't you think leaders should lead by example? That is by instead of levying the extraordinary tax to the citizens, instead they should utterly reduce the cost of administration by reducing their salaries. Don't you think that can be a better way in terms of the issue of taxing? And then also on the security aspect, someone has asked, it appears that the priority of our leaders in East Africa are not the same, and some countries are actually beneficiaries from the insecurities in other countries. What would be your take on that? Just in one minute on the two questions. Councillor John.
Thank you so much, Councillor Patrick. On the issue of giving time, being patient with the government, and the government, for example, leading by example by reducing their salary. First of all, we need to understand how this salary aspect works. It's not just about, for example, the president waking up and saying my salary is this and this and this. No. In Kenya, we have constitutional institutions that are given that mandate of, for example, dealing with salary of state officers. And in our case is the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. So Salaries and Remuneration Commission is the one that determines which office is paid how much. So it's not about the person who is holding the office. The salary is paid to the office. The beneficiary notwithstanding. You can be here tomorrow and the next day you are in another office. So if I decide, for example, I'm the member of parliament today, and I decide to reduce my salary, that can't happen because I'm just a beneficiary of that office. The salary is paid to the office and not to me as a person. So reducing the salary maybe it will not be an honest way to move forward. Reducing their salaries won't, for example, give the budget the best way forward, because salary is just a small aspect of the whole economic situation. So, but by saying let's be honest with the government, let's be patient with the government, is give them time to align their manifesto with the resources. They gave their development agenda to the people. Most people voted for them because of the economic and development agenda that they had. So, but they now need to align those development agenda into now policies and laws, and to be able now to actualize their promises. And they can't do that basically by saying that now, because you are an office holder, you need to reduce your salary. then what? What if the next person comes and then say, I want to double my salary, or I want to do this and this and this? So in most cases, even these salaries, in most cases, it's not even enough to be able to tackle their issues. Because, for example, for a member of parliament, they have vast regions that they govern. And looking at their salaries alone is not even enough. And that's why there are some allowances. Even looking at those allowances alone is not even enough. So basically saying that a state officer to decide to reduce the salary, even legally, is not even possible because you can't reduce your own salary. Before 2010 and before Salary and Remuneration Commission came on board, MPs used to increase and reduce their salaries at whim. But as at now, they can't do that because they will be acting as travailleurs. It will be beyond their mandate. So basically, that is the purview of the Salaries and the Remuneration Commission. And this Salaries and Remuneration Commission, it does not work on vacuum. It looks at the international best standards of how other countries are paying their state officers. So it's not about Kenya alone. It's not about, for example, Uganda alone. It's not about Tanzania. No. If you juxtapose all these countries, you'll find that the office of the president, they are paid almost the same, if not exactly the same. So normally, I would say that as much as we want our leaders to be honest, as much as we want our leaders to, for example, to lead by example, you can't tell me that because you are suffering, I must suffer for me to be able to look like you. No. I expect my leader to live a certain standard of life, don't you? We all do expect as a society. So if we say now reduce your salary so that we look the same, yeah, someone will want to do that, but legally it will not be possible. Then someone will go to court and challenge that decision. You remember the last regime of President Uhuru Kenyatta. They reduced their salaries and they said this should go to, like, all of the salary for a certain month went to the COVID-19 something. And someone went to court to challenge that decision. And that decision was reverted. And their salaries were reimbursed. So it might not be to the public, but their salaries were reimbursed, and the court said state officers are not paid salaries because they have a lot of money, no, or because they hold those positions, no. It is because those offices require certain standards, and those standards are supposed to be upheld. So that would be my take on the reduction of salaries and leading by example. If you don't mind, Council Patrick, will you repeat the second question, please? I think
was on security, whereby you find, yes, some of region, leaders are not reading from the same page.
Yes.
And you find that others are even benefiting, from some of these insecurities.
Yes.
What should be your check? And now these are going to restrict you to 1 minute.
Okay, so is that okay? As you restrict me to 1 minute, is that a question or just an observation?
It's just an observation.
Just an observation.
Just try to observe that there are some leaders who are benefiting, from this insecurity.
Yes, and that's why I said we need to be honest with ourselves. We just need to be honest, especially our leaders. The moment our leader is benefiting from these insecurity issues, then he's not honest. So the first thing that we need to do, we need to be honest first. The moment we are honest with ourselves, the moment we come together as the region, then basically some of these issues we will be able to tackle them before they even crop up. And sometimes they won't even crop up because there will be no need of these security issues to crop up because we are honest with ourselves, we trust our leaders, and then there will be no suspicious activities. So basically, most of these security issues comes about because of suspicion. So because Uganda is doing this, recruiting, for example, 100 military officers, then Kenya, because Kenya wants to overdo what Uganda is doing, it will end up recruiting 500, for example. So this competition sort of thing are the things that brings about the issues of security. So if our leader is benefiting from security issues, for example, terrorism and whatnot, we just need to be honest. Straightforward. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor John. To Councillor Bira, as an advocate, on this judge advocate of the High Court of Uganda, somebody is asking, how would you resolve the conflict between protecting the rights of the LGBTQ and doing what is right? How do you resolve that conflict, Councillor Bira?
Well, Pastor Patrick, thank you very much. Because doing what is right is dependent on one. What is your conscience telling you? Because, for example, now if as an advocate of the High Court of Uganda, this has gone so viral, who is not aware about the new enacted law in Uganda about anti-homosexuality? Who is not aware about that? Because if that is the law, and that's what I said, and of course, you know how it is, because right now it is telling you that whoever would stand for the homosexuals, let you be even an advocate, you are deprived the right to represent those people. Because should you represent them, then you are also participating in criminal law. Maybe we should say that you are an aider or a abettor to the same. But is that right for you as an advocate? It's not right for you as an advocate, because you as an advocate, what you should do is that to represent your client and the interests of your client. But because now that is the law, you advocate Bira, you will not come out to come and represent that person. Because should you represent that person, that's what the law is saying. So that's why I'm saying that it depends on you, the maker of the word, whether it be right or wrong. But the law of Uganda has told you, should you, an advocate, come out to represent an LGBT, then you should also be responsible. Is that fair anyway? In my opinion, it is harsh. It is harsh.
The second question that has been also posed to you, Councillor Bira, is that most African leaders are guilty of changing the constitution, to stay in power, which may later lead to breakdown of law and other relevant positions. What would be your advice for such leaders then? Notwithstanding the Toji Kwatako for your case.
Wow. Well, as a Patrick, of course, I understand that power is sweet. And when you look at someone who has been up, by the way, I appreciate the leadership of Kenya, because it is that way democratic. I love that one. Because if it has been that, that is it. 2 terms go, and that's it. But then you find that in Uganda, like so many people have criticized His Excellency, the President of Uganda, the same. They have gone ahead criticizing. But then you look at the MPs themselves, because they are the ones responsible for amending the constitution. So they also want to stay in power. But I would think that it is because of greed. That's what they see. It is greedy that is making people to suggest so. But also somehow, when people, I just don't want to discuss much about that. I reserve my comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bira, for your response. To also Councillor John, we also highly appreciate you, for having taken your time, for us to be able to, elaborate some of these pertinent issues, that are affecting our region. Now, this juncture, I would wish to, welcome our president, Mr. Abdul Karim Aziz, to give the vote of thanks. Welcome, Mr. Karim Aziz.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patrick. I hope I can be heard. Okay, so before giving the vote of thanks, let me just share something quickly regarding the topic. I know I'm not from the East African community, but as a continent, we share the same thing. On the tax regime, I think I also agree with Councillor John to the extent that we need to change our philosophy and mentality as oppositions. We should not see the actions of the government. We should not take opposition on the face value of it, just oppose everything. We should be able to dialogue with the government, share ideas, present better ideas, as long as we're working for the country. And so it's important that opposition leaders should work closely with the government, bring about their own plan, and let government borrow from some of this plan and implement it, as long as they're working for the same country, the Kenyan people. And similarly, the Kenyan people also need to trust the government, and the government also need to serve the role of a trustee properly, so that any amount of money collected as a result of tax should be used for that purpose. Most of Africans do not pay tax because they do not believe governments will use the money for the purpose they've collected it, and that's a problem. And then finally, I think the resources God has given us as a continent in Africa is so huge that without even taxing the people, if the leaders are more creative, they can generate a lot of resources from what God has given us. So the leaders should look inward into the resources that they have. The one that they've not explored, they should explore it. The one that they've not been activated should be activated, so that at least the masses, if you are not giving them what they want, do not load them more in terms of payment of tax. So that's what I want to add. Then in terms of homosexuality, we've heard from Council Pastor Bera Janet. I think the African leaders, especially the African Union, need to take a position on this. Most of the African countries have been, muzzled to take some of these policies, even if it contradicts their values and their customs as Africans. And so we need to promote our heritage, that's the African heritage, our values and customs. Especially, we need to strengthen the family, so that some of these things would not. I love the example she gave. You have two gays and then you have a daughter they've adopted. How would you train such a daughter when it comes to menstrual period, when it comes to so many things that are very personal, and then you need a woman or a mother to do that? And so these are some of the challenges that and the reality that we need to face as a continent. And finally, on security, I think that is, especially in West Africa now, that is the biggest challenge. The recent one being Niger, people now are resorting to coup. You have coup in Niger, you have in Burkina Faso, you have in Mali, you have in Chad, you have in Guinea, and you have in Sudan. Very many countries in Africa are now resorting to coup, and some scholars are justifying it on the basis that most of these African leaders are not delivering. They are not giving people what they promised, and they're just there to amass wealth and then stay in power forever. As much as some of us do not intellectually subscribe to coup, but African leaders need to wake up and do the right thing. Not until they destroy the country they promise to serve before they wake up. So on that note, I want to especially appreciate our invited guests, starting from Councillor John. Thank you so much for your research. Thank you so much for your input. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. We appreciate everything you've said. And we hope that the leaders, we take, some of the recommendations that you provide. So thank you so much. We appreciate that. And to Madam Bera Janet, thank you so much. Good to see you again after a very long time. It's nice to know that you are doing great. Thank you so much for your research. And thank you so much for bringing the spiritual part of it, to spice this discussion, because at least people will now understand that even God does not subscribe to some of these things that we are doing. And as the owner of the earth in which we live, he has given us a manual in terms of religious scripture on how to survive in this world and how to do basic things that we're not going to regret later. And so I want to sincerely thank you for that approach. I thank you for your commitment, for your dedication to serving your mother and fatherland. And I wish you all the best in your career. And we thank you so much. And it's good again to see you. On behalf of our board of directors, I also want to thank Mr. Patrick Mama Mamu for organizing the 3rd edition of the East African Community Summit. This is the 3rd one. And we thank you so much for putting this together. We thank you so much for the caliber of guests that you presented today. We thank you so much for always being the first to do some of these things. Thank you so much. So on behalf of the board of directors, we just want to thank everyone, all the followers. I know the last question was deliberately asked to put Vera Janet in trouble. But I think the questionnaire is also very clever by not mentioning the name and just say, well, for those leaders. So I'm sure you know the leader they're actually referring to. And thank you so much for also strategically for providing strategic answer to that question. I think it's something that as young people growing up in Africa, we need to agree on that. We need to do better. We need to do better. And you cannot blame the president on one hand because he's doing this with the collaboration of the parliament. And the parliament is said to represent the people. And so it's a complex situation. The parliament, whose interest should be representing the people, connive with the man in power, adjust the constitution, you adjust the age limits, you adjust the term limits, you adjust all the limits. But nature has a way of playing out. Age is something that comes along and plus or minus 20, 30 years. For those who are in Uganda who have never seen another president since 1986, we hope that there will be a constitutional change of power. We're not clamoring for coup. We want a situation where the people will take mandate themselves and then change power. And if they feel that Muse is doing great, so be it. It is the right to choose their leaders. But what we are saying is the parliament should not connive with the president in any country, to sabotage the mandate of the people. So if the constitution says 2 terms, let it be 2 terms, and then you relax. It's only in Africa that people see politics as a job. In other jurisdictions, it's a call to serve. So you serve, and when you're done, you go back to your profession. Most of these African politicians do not have their own career. They've seen politics as a job, as a career, and that's why they want to, they can do or die. So on that note, let me close the 3rd edition of the East African Summit on behalf of the board of directors. And I want to especially also thank the board for giving us this opportunity, starting from our Director of Logistics and Operation, Mr. Ahmed Swale Wengo, our Director of Finance, Dr. Mrs. Olukemi Ridari, our Director of ADMI, that is Mr. John Ayobami, and we wish him happy. Okay, he's in Lusaka to get married. It's not easy. Some people here, okay, we are live, so. All right, Mr. Patrick, over to you. Thank you so much and have a lovely day.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for those wonderful words. Of course, as has been indicated, we come to the end of our 3rd edition for EAC Summit. And I really want also to sincerely thank, our guests, for honoring our invitation. We don't take it for granted. We really appreciate you, and we hope that subsequently we'll be able to onboard you so that you can give more insight on matters and affairs, that are affecting our region as a whole. To our viewers, thank you very much for staying with us and being with us. We'll appreciate you, and we hope that you continue working with us as we continue shaping the future of our region and our continent at large. With those many remarks, I thank you. May God bless you. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.